Right, Dan, there's no shortage of national interest into the education of what's happening in the city of Detroit. Recently, you had two national groups in from the Fordham Institute and also from the Charter School Growth Fund. What were their assessments of what's happening in Detroit right now?
Happily, people on the left and the right politically agree on kind of the current state of affairs in Detroit and on some of the things that should be done to improve the quality of education in Detroit. So their assessment, like those that we've heard from lots of other folks, both on the right and the left, nationally and locally, is that the unregulated marketplace of schools in Detroit, while providing lots of options for parents, does little to improve school quality. And that there are ways to ensure that parents and families have the ability to choose quality schools while at the same time, or to choose schools, while at the same time improving the quality of schools overall. And so those two folks they really came to share with some Republican legislators and charter school advocates and so on that part of what has to happen in Detroit is that we have to put in place some kind of a universal enrollment system that actually makes the exercise of school choice transparent and equitable and allows schools to more effectively plan for the number of students they're going to have, and that we have to have a way in this city and in this state of closing low-performing schools, particularly low-performing charter schools, actually was their message. The folks at the Charter School Growth Fund and at the Fordham Institute both believe that you can't improve the quality of charter school education if you're not willing to close the worst performing of them.
It might even be frustrating for parents to hear when you start talking about what's happening on the right and the left. The people say this shouldn't even be political at all.
Agreed. Well, it shouldn't be, I would argue, and in fact it doesn't have to be in this particular case. There's lots to agree on here for many different reasons, but there are lots of things to agree on and that we do generally agree on at this point. So we've here locally, with the work of the Coalition on the Future Detroit School Children, and the governor's announcement shortly thereafter, we do have some rough outlines of an agreement in place around what kind of things should be done. There does need to be some kind of office created that would be responsible for opening, closing, and citing Detroit schools, whatever the governance type. We do need a universal enrollment system. We're going to have to do something about relieving the DPS debt burden that has been carried for on and on. So there are lots of things that there is general agreement on. We've just got to get to working out the details of them.
All right, so what are we waiting for then?
Well, we're waiting on this legislature. We had big roads issue to get taken care of this spring, as you know, and we also had to get a budget passed. But with any luck at all, this will be a primary issue, maybe even the most important issue on the agenda for the legislature when they reconvene this fall. And certainly, as far as I'm concerned and other stakeholders are concerned, this should be the most important issue on the agenda this fall.
What are you hearing so far in terms of movement?
Not much. There's so lots of, the really difficult issue, perhaps the most difficult issue for folks to figure out is how to handle the DPS debt. As you know, the Coalition on the Future Detroit School Children, of which I'm a part, did come forward with the recommendation that the state is going to have to assume that debt. And while I can't speak on behalf of the coalition, there are co-chairs who are responsible for that. That recommendation was met with kind of understanding by the governor's office and increasingly by legislators that DPS isn't going to manage its way out of the debt. The debt has continued to grow, has grown while the district's been under state management. In fact, the state has been managing the district for almost all of the accumulation of that debt. And so something else is going to have to be done, and folks are wrestling with how to handle that, I would say, is the primary thing. That's the stumbling block at this point.
You have so many people assessing what's happening in the city of Detroit in terms of education, whether it is charter school and taking a look at DPS, and obviously knowing that all of them are connected in some way. When do you finally stop and say, okay, enough assessment, enough experts from around the country coming in and giving their 2 cents of what we should or should not do? It's time for some action now.
Oh, I think we're at that point, Christy. I really do. We've had years of data at Excellent Schools Detroit. We've been looking at this information for the better part of 4.5 or 5 years now. And the trend lines are clear and obvious. We've had lots of national experts who've weighed in, lots of local experts who've weighed in. We've all basically reached the same conclusion that the system isn't working. When you look at the data around student performance and student academic achievement, those trend lines are flat at best. Even as a state, the trend lines are not good. And so I think we all know that education needs to be fixed in the state. And we have the outlines of a broad agreement around what could be done to improve education. At this point, it's about really the brass tacks work of hammering out the details.
What do you say to parents who keep watching this jockeying back and forth, and they've got to make sure that their kids go to school in the fall, and they feel that they don't have time for this negotiation and this this large rediscovery of what's going to eventually happen with Detroit schools? What do you tell parents?
I tell them they're absolutely right. At Excellent Schools Detroit, we've been arguing for the need for these fixes for some time now. And I think they're right to be frustrated, and I think they should communicate that frustration directly to their elected officials. It's just time for state policy on education to get fixed. It's particularly time for it to be fixed with regard to Detroit, which has served as the tip of the spear for the state. And it's long overdue. And every year that passes, every month that passes, does make it much more difficult to see the improvements that we want to see while our kids are still kids, because they, of course, are growing up. Mine are growing up just like yours are, just like all of our viewers are, and time is of the essence. So there's no time to waste. We've got to get this done now. Now that we have rough outline about agreement about what to do, it's just a matter of getting it done. We just need the political will to get it done.
Could what happens here next in Detroit be a model for other big cities around the country? Are people watching this?
Absolutely, people are watching this, and they should be watching it both in the state and around the country. Just to put a finer point on your question, the solutions that we can come up with in Detroit can be a model for other cities in this state and for other cities around the country. Detroit is a fairly unique city in the degree of market share, if you will, that charter schools have in Detroit. We're higher than many. But it seems likely, given the trajectory and trends in lots of cities, that many cities are headed in this direction. And the truth is, if we can figure out how to regulate this marketplace in a way that is equitable and transparent and fair for families, and allows for higher quality schools over time, that would be a model for lots of other cities, whether it's Washington, D.C. or Denver or Los Angeles or Chicago or New York or New Orleans.
Do you find that just mentioning the words charter schools makes the debate even more murky when you're talking about comparing charter schools with public school system? Or, I mean, the DPS system versus charter schools?
There are lots of folks, Christy, who are still mired in what we would characterize as the debate of a decade ago, which is that charter schools are the silver bullet magic answer and they're going to resolve the problems. And of course, they haven't, and they don't by themselves. They can be an effective part of the solution, but they have to be part of a coherent whole solution. And part of the problem in Michigan is that we have not articulated, and certainly not from a policy perspective, that coherent whole solution. So there are folks who would still argue that traditional districts are the solution or that charter schools are the solution. Our data, which we've been looking at for a long time now, suggests that there are good charter schools and bad charter schools, and that there are good traditional district schools and bad traditional district schools, and that neither by itself is the solution. Much more of what's needed is a way to hold all of those schools accountable for performance and invest in those schools in ways that make sense for the benefit of kids and families.
What's been your biggest frustration?
Probably the time that it's taken to get to this point. It's been a long time coming, and frankly, so we look at this data probably more than most and study the system more than most, but quite honestly, it feels to us like we should have landed here 2 or 3 years ago. And it's been frustrating that it's taken us this long to get to this point.
Do you think we haven't landed here because the city had to go through a bankruptcy process and there was more focus on that?
Well, certainly that was a part of the issue. And I should share that one of the things that with the city coming out of that bankruptcy, One of the things, and Tanya Allen talks about this, she's very eloquent about this point. Tanya leads the Skillman Foundation and is one of the co-chairs of this coalition on the future Detroit school children, is that having had to work together to get through the bankruptcy, we've built a muscle in this region, in this state, and in the city that matters, and that we should leverage to solve other significant, like big, sometimes regional problems, and education is one of them. So it would be a shame, frankly, to have built that muscle and not to apply it to something like this, where the solutions are within our grasp if we just, once again, figure out how to work together.
You could also make the argument, too, that if you don't go ahead now and put everything behind fixing the school system in the city of Detroit, all the work that you did during bankruptcy was for naught.
That's right. It's quite clear the largest demographic to leave the city over the last 2 or 3 decades have been families with school-age kids. Quite honestly, for a mayor who says, judge me based on, the repopulation of the city, one of the most important things that we can all get our arms around is how to improve the quality of schools in Detroit, because of course that is one of the primary drivers of where families with school-age kids choose to live. It's difficult to decide to live in a city that doesn't provide great educational options for your kids. It's frankly difficult to live in a state that doesn't do that. And as a state and as a city, as a region, these are issues that we've got to wrestle.
What can we expect in the next 2 months?
Well, I'm hoping that the coalition will stay active and that the governor will stay active on this, that the mayor has endorsed the coalition's recommendations largely. Hopefully the mayor and the governor will be able to come to some agreement on some details, and the coalition will be a part of that conversation. Hopefully we'll be able to bring enough legislators along in that conversation to get some meaningful legislation passed. Hopefully also Detroiters are paying, and folks around the state are paying enough attention to this issue to keep applying pressure to the legislature to get it resolved. It's much like the roads, right? These things sometimes take time, and the legislature won't get it done the first time out. So they've had a bite or two at this apple. We've got to continue to apply pressure to them in order for them to ultimately meet the challenge and get something passed.
Dan Varner, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
It's great to be here. Thank you.